Yes, north, east, or west. It's Maxwell House wherever you go. Famous for finer flavor, this delicious coffee is good to the last drop. For the best in coffee drinking pleasure, always ask for Maxwell House.
It's the roar of the presses, working day and night in the north, south, east, and west of our nation. These daily presses pour out over 48 million newspapers. And behind these millions of headlines are the country's ace reporters, men and women who bring you the inside story. Tonight, the makers of Maxwell House Coffee bring you America's press conference of the air, Meet the Press, where you'll meet top newsmen in an unrehearsed, spontaneous press conference with one of the outstanding personalities in today's news, King Peter of Yugoslavia. Ready for the conference are 4 of America's top newsmen who are here to ask the questions you would ask King Peter. Now meet Mr. Lawrence Spivak. Mr. Spivak is the editor of the American Mercury magazine. And here is Mr. Temple Fielding, distinguished foreign correspondent. Noted among the gentlemen of the press is Mr. Abe Raskin of the New York Times. And another important newsman here tonight is Mr. Murray Davis of the New York World Telegram. And here is King Peter, the exiled monarch of Yugoslavia. And now, Miss Martha Roundtree, producer of Meet the Press.
Now, gentlemen, who has the first question? We'll start with Mr. Davis.
King Peter, I would like to know whether or not you prefer to be called King or Mr. Which is your preference? Your last name is Kara-Georgevich, isn't it? Something like that?
That's right. Very difficult to pronounce.
Yes, it is.
Is that the way you pronounce it?
Is that the way you pronounce it?
That's right.
Well, do you prefer King instead of Mr.?
I prefer to be called King, yes.
But you aren't a king.
In my opinion, I am.
Well.
In an opinion of very many people, too.
Do you intend to stay in this country? Citizenship here?
No.
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 Mr. Raskin.
Well, King Peter, is it your feeling that a majority of the people of your native country would prefer to have you back as king?
Definitely.
What makes you so confident that they would?
Because they look in me as an alternative of what they have now.
And you're convinced that they don't like what they have now?
I'm convinced of that.
Well, all the reports that have been coming out of Yugoslavia currently indicate that as Marshal Tito moves more and more in a nationalist direction, that he's regaining and gaining even more support than he had previously.
That is true. I'm sure he is gaining a certain amount.
You feel that this has helped him, the break with the common form, has helped him internally?
In a way, yes. But in other ways, he has lost.
Well, in what ways has he lost?
He has lost because he hasn't got the support of the nations that supported him before.
And do you feel those are vital to his continued rule?
Very much so.
You don't feel, then, that there's any chance of ultimate success in his break with the Soviet regime?
No, certainly not.
Did you have any trouble getting into the country? I mean, did anyone in the State Department make it difficult, or was it simple for you to get over here?
No.
Mr.
You're a free country, and everybody can express their opinion here.
In other words, there wasn't any opposition?
No, definitely not.
Mr. Fielding.
I'd like to ask King Peter the question that I think many Americans would like to know today. When I was in Yugoslavia with Tito during the war, he used to take these spam cans and things and paint them over and give credit to the Russians for our supplies.
Yes.
Now, do you think, A, that he should have American aid now that he has broken with Moscow? That's A, and B, do you think he might treat it the same way?
That's a very difficult question to answer, but I've answered it already once or twice before press conferences. My opinion is that it would be a great mistake for the United States of America to give him any aid that would be of any strategic value.
What constitutes strategic value, King Peter?
Most material.
Would food be in that classification?
No, definitely not. No, food could not really be of strategic value.
Mr. Spivak.
Well, King Peter, what exactly do you think is going to happen if we don't give him aid now that Stalin has broken with him? What do you think is going to happen to Tito, and what do you think is going to happen to Yugoslavia?
Tito has been saying, and I think he believes it sincerely, that he can get on without anybody, without any help.
Well, do you think he can?
No, I don't.
What do you think would happen?
Not under the economy and the system of economy that he's running at the moment.
Well, what do you think?
Yugoslavia is a very rich country.
Well, what do you think would happen if we don't give him any aid? If you were to prognosticate the future?
That I can't answer because it depends very much on the methods he uses.
Well, do you think Tito is likely to fall if he doesn't get the aid?
Not necessarily.
Well, why then do you think we ought not to give him any aid?
I think that if you are aiding Tito, you will be aiding communism. And you're aiding in aiding communism, you're defeating your own purpose.
Well, can we aid Yugoslavia in any way without aiding Tito?
That's awfully difficult at the moment.
Mr. Raskin.
Then what course would you advocate in the United States relations with Yugoslavia? If we don't give them aid, we will certainly be driving him closer and closer to Moscow again. If we do give him aid, we will be defeating ourselves in your judgment. Yes. What course do you feel we ought to follow with respect
I suggest
to Tito?
that you should demand things in recompense. I mean, if you offer him some aid, ask something in return.
Well, would you have us advocate the restoration of the monarchy?
No,
as a
I
condition of
wouldn't.
aid?
Certainly not.
Then what kind of conditions would we impose on our aid?
I would insist that he has a real free election.
And you feel that would lead to a call for the restoration of the monarchy?
In my opinion, yes.
Mr. Davis.
Don't you think your people might go into a presidency rather than a monarchy under the present conditions of the world?
I don't know. I don't think so, though.
You don't?
No.
What gives you this confidence that you will be recalled? Do you have any groups working over there for you that you're in touch with?
No.
Closely in touch with?
No.
Well, how do you find out about this? Not by a Ouija board. You must have some contact.
I know what the will of my people is, in my opinion.
Well, you have 16 million people. Isn't
Yes,
that right about
yes,
that?
that's right.
And you haven't been over there, what, 2 years, 3 years?
More than that.
Well, you're kind of far away to be so confident without having some kind of a lead in there.
Well, I have a lead in, but I'd rather not discuss that.
How are you financing yourself now, since you aren't in business as a king anymore?
Well, that's a very embarrassing question to ask me.
Well, I'm sorry if it's embarrassing.
I think I could ask you the same question.
I'm working. I've got a job.
I'm sure he didn't mean it that way, King Peter. Mr. Spivak.
Well, King Peter, I think what he meant to ask was all your wealth in Yugoslavia confiscated.
Yes.
But some of your wealth outside of Yugoslavia evidently was not.
No, because in the first place, in my opinion, I don't know of any wealth of mine outside Yugoslavia. I had quite a number of properties in Yugoslavia.
I just want to make
And
this...
outside, I didn't have anything. I just received my salary.
As you've noticed, the American press is a free press, and some of the questions may seem embarrassing.
I know.
We don't really try to embarrass anyone. Will you tell me this about our press? Are we accurately reporting what's happening in Yugoslavia in your judgment? Is our press telling, as you see it, most of the truth or enough of the truth?
I believe your press is reporting as much as it knows and can see in Yugoslavia and can report.
Well, is there anything that they're not reporting that you can tell us tonight that the American people ought to know?
I could tell you many things, but that would be giving away maybe sources of information which are not mine to give.
Well, can you tell us this about the state of affairs in Yugoslavia?
In what way?
Do you think that there is much chance that within the next year or so, if we don't do anything at all in Yugoslavia, that Tito may be overthrown? From the information that you have.
Tito may be overthrown both two ways. He may be overthrown by the will of the people, and he may be overthrown by Moscow.
You mean by that you think there is a chance that Moscow may move in on Yugoslavia?
Very probably.
Well, what do you think the people will do in a case like that?
A certain section will support him, a certain section will completely be neutral.
And
The
what
majority will be neutral, because they know that if they resisted, or if they try to help him, or even build up another resistance against Tito and Moscow at the same time, that the punishment would be too great.
Will that help or hurt your chances of being recalled, in your judgment?
In my judgment, I think it would, if anything, hurt my chances.
Mr. Fielding now.
Assuming that you did get back King Peter, you spoke a minute ago of the will of the people. What would your regime be like? How would it differ from Tito's? How would it differ from a presidency, a monarchy, your monarchy?
Well, it would be, I call it a monarchical presidency, but it would be run this way. It would be rather run on the system of the British Empire. Yugoslavia would have a parliamentary system, and the king would just be there as a protector, and the people would run the country by themselves through their House of Representatives and their Senate.
Through elective means?
Yes, through elective means.
Would that apply to all laws?
Universal suffrage.
I see.
Mr. Raskin.
Well, do you feel, King Peter, that the memory of your father's regime might possibly lead to some suspicion, some hesitancy on the part of the people about the legitimacy of this promise of yours?
No, certainly not.
Well,
I don't think
it was not a democratic regime when
it was not a democratic regime. At one time it was, but there were moments then that things had to be taken a bit drastically.
Well, now, what, in your judgment, impelled the people to accept a communist form of government? Why did they turn to communism if it wasn't the memory of these things plus the war-induced unrest that descended on them? Do you feel the Tehran Agreement drove them into it?
Very much so.
Well, how was that a factor in your judgment?
Well, I'd rather not go into those matters because they would be getting too near the point.
Gentlemen, if I can interrupt this discussion for just a moment, here's something I'm sure you'll enjoy seeing. It opens with a view that has thrilled millions of people on their first arrival in the United States.
New York City, world's greatest port. To this teeming island rock flow much of the goods and foods that sustain and comfort Americans. And among the things that come to us in ships is that friend of a million morning hours, the coffee we drink. From the far countries to the south it comes. Fine Latin American coffees, many of them destined for the world's largest roasting plant, where they're combined to create the famous Maxwell House blend. The word blend is all important, for truly good coffee is a creation of many premium coffees blended with painstaking skill. A skill Maxwell House has developed to a subtle art in this small room. Here, the individual coffees are carefully cup-tested by master blenders, whose art rivals that of the wine taster. Here, the flavor characteristics of many coffees are combined for mellowness, vigor, and body. The exacting standards of the blend millions enjoy are zealously guarded, and no other test can tell as well when coffee is flavor perfect as the blender's sensitive taste. Yes, the final test is the flavor in the cup. And the flavor of famous Maxwell House has made it America's favorite brand of coffee. And everywhere, coffee lovers know that this familiar sign of good coffee means Maxwell House. The richer, mellower, more flavorful blend. The coffee that's good to the last drop.
Now, King Peter, we gave you a moment there to kind of slide out of that one and get your breath. I do think that Mr. Raskin looks like he's very anxious to pursue that, so...
Well, actually, I want to change the focus a little bit. King Peter, when you were in Madrid just before coming to this country, a member of your entourage said that one of your functions while you were over here would be to assist in the organization of a committee of exiles with a view to reestablishing a more democratic form of government in Belgrade. Is that part of your mission here?
Well, let's answer that question point by point. First of all, I was not in Madrid. That was a mistake.
You mean somebody was posing as you?
I was not in Madrid.
Very good.
Secondly, nobody could, well, they might have said things in my name, but it was not with my approval. Third, was there going to be a committee made here, Yugoslav committee?
That's the question.
All right. I believe that political gentlemen from my country intend to form a committee, and I will support that committee once it's formed. But I, as a constitutional monarch, have no right to form any committees any more than the King of England has to form a government.
To what extent have those plans taken shape, to your knowledge, without your active connivance?
Well, they have developed to a certain point where there are talks between the different sections of Yugoslav exiled political leaders, Serb, Croat, and Slovene.
And do they have real roots in the country itself, or are they all people who are outside the country?
Some of them have deep roots in the country, some are people who've been out for many years.
Mr. Spivak now.
King Peter, do you think that the people of Yugoslavia are far enough advanced politically for a really democratic regime?
Yes, I definitely do.
And do you think that the reestablishment of the kingship is more democratic, for example, than the reestablishment of a democracy such as ours in this day and age?
I would base a democracy on a compromise between your kind of democracy and the democracy you have in the British Empire.
I don't mean this to be an embarrassing question, but what useful purpose at a time like this can a kingship serve that a presidency, for example, couldn't? Why should anybody in this day and age be permitted to pass on his crown to somebody else who may be less able than he is? Unless it's just going to be a figurehead, the way more or less the English kingship is.
That's my way of thinking of it. Actually, you just said it.
You think the kingship should be more or less of a figurehead?
Yes, more or less of a figurehead and the protector.
Now, as we've talked to you tonight and as we've listened to you, we don't get the idea that you're the kind who would be a figurehead. You sound much too smart for that. Would you be satisfied to go back and just be the figurehead in your own country?
Yes.
Mr. Fielding.
I'm just wondering if the King of England is a figurehead, or if he's more than a figurehead. I mean, isn't he actually a spiritual rallying point?
The rallying point. That's the most important thing.
Mr. Davis, Mr. Raskin, I'll be back here in a moment.
A bit ago, you thought that perhaps Moscow would move in. And
yes.
Did you mean an armed conflict?
No.
Move in?
Not necessarily an armed conflict. It could be armed. But they can move in without an armed conflict.
You mean come in as they did in Poland, for instance?
Yes. They came, as they came in Czechoslovakia.
Hmm. Do you see any signs of revolution in your own country right now? Is there any hint of that?
No.
No armed revolution at all?
No, certainly not.
Now, Mr. Raskin.
King Peter, I was thinking back to those unhappy days, at least unhappy for you, of early 1945 when considerable pressure was being exerted on you to set up a regency in your country.
Yes.
And you finally did succumb to that pressure and agreed. The regency was set up and it functioned for several months, and finally you returned to London and issued a very bitter statement to the effect that this regency was in fact a servant of the Soviet, that that was not considered discreet at the time. What you said was that it had become very totalitarian and undemocratic, that you could no longer support it. I wondered why in your role
It did not fulfill its constitutional duties. That's
Precisely
what I said.
so, but I wondered why you had kept silent through all of the period while this was going on, and it wasn't until the day after Tito announced that he didn't feel the country ought to have a king anymore and that it ought to substitute a Republican form of government that you took it upon yourself to make this statement.
It's a very simple answer to that. That Tito formally respected the Regency up till then.
Well, had he done it, your statement indicated that over a considerable period this had
Yes.
been a puppet regency.
Yes, but he had not formally broken.
I mean, to the point
To
of
the
saying that
with
they
the
should get
Regency.
rid of the king.
Not only that, but they no more after that could have represented the king, could they?
They could not have represented the king, but they continued to hold office. In other words, they didn't.
They
control,
continued
you
to
did.
hold office on their own,
Well, that's quite true.
without my consent.
The question that I was trying to establish was why you had kept silent in the face of a pronounced drift.
Well, I wanted to give them a chance to do what they could.
Mr. Spivak.
King Peter, you said a moment ago that you felt that the king ought to be a rallying point
Yes,
for his countrymen.
yes.
You also said that you felt that the majority of your people, the vast majority of your people, in a plebiscite would come out for you.
Yes.
Do you think if you went back to Yugoslavia that you could act as a rallying point for the
Very
large
much.
majority of those people? Well, why don't you go back, may I ask?
He'd probably be shot.
Not only that, I'd probably be shot the first step I put inside my country.
Well, is there no underground movement at all? Is there no group of supporters who might work with you to
Yes.
rally the people around you?
But it would be criminal today to rally these people, because the results would be this, that the innocent people would suffer, and we suffered so much during the war. It's definitely not worth starting any kind of a resistance today.
Well, how then do you think
So many
Tito
million
can-
people would be massacred because of that.
Well, is there
We
any-
don't want to start a civil war now.
Is there any chance then that Tito will be overthrown by the people themselves unless there is some outside interference?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I think definitely there is a chance. But the people have to decide that themselves. It's not for me to decide or instigate them to revolt.
Mr. Davis.
Early in Tito's rise to political fame, there were stories that he was Russian. What nationality is he, anyway?
We just don't know.
You don't? What do you suspect?
Well, all I know is that he doesn't speak our language very well.
He does. What language does he speak best?
I don't know. But over the radio he does. I've heard him on the radio.
You never heard of him until he suddenly catapulted as head of the Communist Party, as it were.
No, I've never heard of him.
You never heard of him before?
No.
Mr. Raskin.
I wonder, King Peter, if you could shed a little light on a trial that may have been held for propaganda purposes or that may have been authentic. It was held in Belgrade in October, at which 3 confessed informants of yours were put on trial, admitted that they had supplied information to you, which they told the court was all highly unauthentic and that they were giving you for the sole purpose of continuing on your payroll.
Well, all I can say to that is, and it's a very simple answer, I got no information from anybody like that.
Did you send any money to anybody in exchange for information?
Not.
Or was the whole thing then concocted?
Naturally. It's the same idea as the Mikolajczyk trial and all the other trials, just to compromise the United States.
Well, had you ever heard of any of these 3 gentlemen who gave this testimony, who confessed?
I'd heard of one of them before, but I mean, I'd never met the gentleman.
But he was not an informant, of
No.
course. He's not one of the people who keeps you informed.
Certainly not.
Mr. Fielding.
King Peter, what is your solution, if any, to that tremendous hotspot, Trieste?
Well, this is rather an amusing thing, because I consider that Trieste should be made the seat of the United Nations. I know that lots of people will not agree with me in this. But as it's one of the greatest points of contention, and Yugoslavia and Italy will be always having trouble over this city and port of Trieste. I think the only solution is to make it a city.
Move from Switzerland, you mean?
Well, they'd be...
From 42nd Street.
Oh, the gentlemen who were building those buildings have be very annoyed to hear me say this.
King Peter, we were speaking of Madrid a while ago, which reminds me of Spain and Franco. How do you feel about supporting Franco?
That's a very awkward question. I don't know very much about Spain. We have had good relations. Before the war, during the war, we were on the auspices of the British Empire. They carried on our affairs, and since then we have not had any real contacts with it.
Mr. Spivak.
King Peter, have you been in touch at all with our State Department, any of the officials of our State Department?
I'd rather not answer that question.
Can you tell us this? There's a growing impression in the country that Tito can be bought.
Yeah.
Is someone in this country responsible for making the American people feel that that is so? Anybody connected with our State Department, as far as you know?
Not that I know of. So I'd like to just tell you one thing. A short time ago, a few months ago, in, what was it, August, Tito said to his own party comrades, he said, during the war, we had to compromise and be friends with capitalist countries like the United States and Great Britain. But all this was a maneuver to be able to get their support so that we could win. He got a big laugh out of that. You see now, he says, you see now, we are free, we can do what we want. We have established our Communist Party. We have established our communist regime. We have what we want, and we have used them. So don't be annoyed with us, with me, for trying to compromise with them.
If you were able to write your own ticket for the United States, what would you want us to do to help you regain your throne in Yugoslavia?
That I will not answer today.
Will you answer it tomorrow?
Well, maybe tomorrow or the day after.
Well, why should you hesitate to answer that question? Certainly you're anxious to get your throne back.
Yes, but I don't want to put it over right now.
Mr. Raskin.
What do you mean, you don't want to put it over, or you don't want to
I
announce
have
your
my
idea?
program. I have my program. I don't want to embarrass anyone.
Do you have a timetable connected with your program?
No, nothing special.
King Peter, to turn the subject just a little, I wonder what significance you attach to the fact that in his New Year's Day message, Tito is concerned...
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop. It really isn't fair, but I'm sure you're not going to be too unhappy, King Peter. I do have to interrupt. Our time is up. Thank you, King Peter, for your willingness to meet the press. Right now, suppose you learn how folks all over the country enjoy a truly good cup of coffee every day in the week.
Yes, north, south, east, or west. It's Maxwell House wherever you go. Famous for finer flavor, this delicious coffee is good to the last drop. For the best in coffee drinking pleasure, always ask for Maxwell House.
Next week's guest will be another important figure in the news. Now, this is Ken Roberts saying goodnight for Mr. Lawrence Spivak, Mr. Temple Fielding, Mr. Abe Raskin, Mr. Murray Davis, Miss Martha Roundtree, and King Peter. Meet the Press is presented to you each week by the makers of Maxwell House Coffee, who want to take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy New Year. Be sure to look in next week, same time, same station, for Meet the Press, brought to you by Maxwell House, the coffee that's always good to the last drop.